a little while back, we drew up a set of model risk management principles. And while I was going through looking at the regulatory environment, which came late in the day, I found it odd how many countries had implemented AI governance guidelines, but seemingly nothing for model risk management. But why was this? Many of the systems we are discussing are the same systems, data-driven, model-based, increasingly intelligent. So why are there two governance streams? That piqued my curiosity and made me suggest it as a discussion topic for this conference. The reason lies in how and where each discipline emerged. They had different origins, different in situational homes. Model risk management grew out of the financial crisis and the prudential reform that followed 2008. Those countries most affected already had well-developed supervisory regimes, Basel frameworks, capital requirements, and requirements for stress testing and independent validation. So when formal model risk guidance emerged, such as SR 11.7, it was a logical extension of an existing mindset. Many other jurisdictions were less affected by the crisis and had not yet embedded Basel-style governance as deeply. Then the digital revolution arrived, and it arrived at scale. AI was no longer just a technical issue. It affected entire societies across sectors well beyond finance. As a result, AI governance became politically urgent and publicly visible. The overall result is what you see here. Jurisdictions that were prudential first, jurisdictions that were digital first, and a growing convergence group, which brings us to the real question, not whether these streams are separate, but whether they actually belong together. Those patterns are not accidental. They reflect different governance cultures. Model risk management largely evolved within the banking supervisory ecosystem, embedded sectorally and shaped through institutional reform. AI governance often emerged as centrally coordinated national policy applied across sectors from the outset. You can see the difference in where they were shaped. Model risk management was shaped in risk committees. AI governance was often shaped in strategy documents. One began with validation reports, the other began with white papers. And if we look back at how these disciplines emerged, the divergence becomes quite clear. Model risk management grew out of financial instability. It was shaped largely within financial institutions and by supervisors focused on systemic safety. So it naturally became embedded within central banks and prudential regulators, with an emphasis on technical reliability in support of capital integrity. By contrast, AI governance was driven by technological expansion and by broader societal concerns about, well, what all algorithms could do at scale. The key actors there were policymakers, digital regulators, and ethics committees employed or engaged by ministries of technology, data protection authorities, and cross-sector regulators. It was not capital committees or prudential regulators. In other words, some countries had Basel, others had bandwidth. If we compress that comparison, it looks like this. Crisis versus revolution, prudential reform versus societal protection, institutions versus ecosystems. Ultimately, does it work versus can it be trusted? And at its core, the difference becomes even simpler. Model risk management protects the balance sheet. AI governance protects society. One safeguards capital, the other safeguards rights. One asks whether the institution is safe. The other asks whether the system is trustworthy. That's all a distillation of kind of what has gone by in the past in the different environments. Some time back, Joseph Breeden used a cultural reference, a line from a Batman movie. Yes, we are now using comic book dialogue at a governance conference, but the line is useful. It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me. Strip away the cape, and the principle is straightforward. Governance is defined not by the label of the technology, but by what the system actually does and how it is used. Whatever their origins, this is the reality. AI systems now drive credit decisions. They affect capital. They rely on machine learning, increasingly generative techniques. That means they require validation. And at the same time, they create ethical exposure. So they sit directly at the intersection of reliability and legitimacy, which is an uncomfortable place to sit, which means that the separation between the two streams can no longer be clean. The systems we are governing today are not the systems that MRM was originally designed for, and they are not the systems early AI governance frameworks imagined either. Modern intelligence systems are adaptive. They are multi-component. Some retrain automatically. They include vendor components. They operate across borders. In other words, the systems evolved. The governance frameworks did so more slowly. Increasingly, they also include generative AI and agentic AI, models that are non-deterministic and continuously evolving. Traditional MRM assumed relatively stable deterministic models with clear inputs, clear outputs, and fixed validation cycles. AI governance, by contrast, often began with the level of principles, ethics frameworks, strategy documents, societal guardrails. Both approaches made sense in their original context, but neither on its own fully addresses what these systems have now become, which raises the real question. Can governance converge? I would suggest that it must. I'm going to sort of come back on that one because I think I've changed my mind. But convergence does not mean dilution. Where intelligent systems have prudential consequences, where they affect capital, balance sheets, regulated decision makings, the disciplines of model risk management cannot be optional. Reliability is not negotiable. At the same time, these systems operate within societies. Legitimacy is not optional either. The future is not MRM or AI governance. It is a governance architecture that integrates both prudential discipline anchored by validation, monitoring, and control, and extended by transparency, fairness, and accountability. That is the convergence challenge. All right, that's a mouthful. I think you would agree. And so there again, to open it up to discussion, see if there's any questions. Peter, is there anything that the one thing when I said I might kind of change my mind or been thinking about it, because when I was listening to one of the earlier presentations, I was thinking, about this whole Batman principle. It's not who I am, but what I do that defines me. Effectively, if the use of a model has any impact upon the prudential requirements for financial institution, and the model risk guidelines must sort of be should play a role. Whereas if it is a broader societal implications, then AI governance plays a role. So it's really the two, depending upon the level at which you are speaking, the level that you're dealing with. Not one or the other. It's kind of two tiers depending upon how high up you go.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I want to encourage all those out there in the auditorium to write your questions into the chat while we are starting the discussion. One thing that I'm sitting here in Frankfurt, Germany, part of the European Union, that I'm reminded of is the EU AI Act, which is more or less the first official document trying to put some standards on regulation of artificial intelligence. And when you follow discussions here within Europe, mostly within Central Europe, you hear also two rivaling perspectives. One is that, as you said, we need these AI regulations in order to protect society, protect the customer, protect the people. And on the other side, people say that look at Silicon Valley or look at China, what they are doing and how they are evolving without paying much attention to what we think should be regulated in Europe. So they are evolving quite fast, and we are somehow falling behind. So there is this tension between regulation and evolution. And you're right, you need to find some sort of balance. But maybe it's also a cultural dependence where you set, so to say, the balance. What and in Europe, at the moment at least, it seems to be that we try to protect the society and then try to find where we could use forms of AI.
Just
I don't know. Yeah.
sorry, I just brought this slide back up to sort of take a look at the various sort of countries that are on here. I think it's come back up again. You see it?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
If you take a look at the countries, and I was avoiding sort of making any type of political comment on this, but you sort of take a look at the political structure or of the various countries in those columns, and how they tend to be dominated, and especially in terms of China and Singapore, it's not necessarily the aspects that they are considering in terms of AI governance. They're looking at it to some extent as societal control. That's kind of like how that was my take on it, and someone could argue against me on that. Whereas a lot of the European Union tends to be trying to protect the society, and some countries are trying to control the society.
Mhm, mhm.
And in the face of a rapidly evolving technology. The European Union is erring on the side of protecting society, but sort of China, it's more of a control aspect.
Mhm, mhm.
China and Singapore, I'd say also UAE and Saudi Arabia, as it stands at the moment. Japan is the outlier in the center column.
Mhm.
That's why there is a statement up here. With AI governance regulations still maturing, what approaches are banks taking to implement AI responsibility and demonstrate adequate risk controls and regulatory compliance? I have the feeling as though we should have sort of I am not inside a bank at the moment. Sort of I'd say that the most of the risk controls are it depends upon what level of AI. Are you talking about the generative AI? Are you talking about machine learning models, or just sort of the other types of AI? There is so much going on, it all becomes muddied, especially in the age of the generative AI, where it's trying to figure out sort of how is the stuff being used. I think those are the most advanced in that regard are trying to put in controls monitoring, or at least monitor the prompts that are being provided to the AI tools, sort of see if they are being manipulated. But even then, sort of like um, the when you've got sort of RAG systems, they can be the retrieval augmented generation, which is something I had never heard of until a couple of months ago, because of my involvement with this group. They are prompts can be used to manipulate the system. You ask questions how to bypass the rules and regulations. regulations within an organization. You're talking about regulatory compliance. I'd say a lot of it you've got, it depends upon, is there actually any regulation in the country? It's, within the United States, it's more self-regulation where the banks are muddling their way through, uh, trying to figure out what is best by going through their own learning curve or learning from others. Peter, your comment? If anybody
Yeah,
else
yeah.
wants to provide an opinion in the chat, please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, in the chat, please share your views. So since I'm working inside a bank, but I have to say that of course my subjective perspective is not necessarily representative of my institution. But my own opinion on this is that whenever you implement a new technique, should it be AI or machine learning or whatsoever, if there's somebody in the bank, some human who is made accountable or responsible for all consequences or most of the consequences, then there's a natural way of trying to mitigate at least the worst outcomes. Um, and also it pays off if you have some sort of ring-fenced area where you can try to some sort of innovation labs, for example, where you can try to see how this will work and to spot at least the basic topics. Yeah.
There is a comment about sort of Singapore having released voluntary guidance for agentic AI risk management. I don't know if that was specific to agentic AI or I knew there was AI guidelines more generally. But there it is voluntary, and I think that's kind of something that's coming out in a lot of the countries. It's not regulations per se, it is guidance because it's so difficult to provide any real regulations. The regulations work when things are stable, when things are bedded down. But when things are evolving so rapidly, you've got to just come up with higher level concepts and guardrails within which people operate. So NIST, sort of, so I don't know what NIST is. Uh,
I think it's some National Institute of Standard, but I'm also not from the United States, so
it might not be. Oh, so Lynn is in Lynn is in the United States. So I think she's
yeah,
down south.
okay.
Uh,
So at least I am not too knowledgeable of these standards. But this brings me to one question. Maybe, of course, Lynn's question, if you could say something on this, right? But this brings me to one aspect, the divergence of regulation between Europe, for example, and the United States. Um,
so
this seems
what
to
is
manifest.
your what? Sorry, how do you perceive it as having diverged?
So I think that if you follow discussions from the European Commission, for example, and the administration in Washington, then you see that sometimes the question is how Europe will regulate companies from Silicon Valley, for example, when they do business
Right.
within Europe.
Well,
This is
so actually, I
one
could.
aspect where it
Yeah,
seems to be a divergence.
yeah.
Or yeah.
I think sort of there's been this sort of cultural shift within the United States, whereby they are trying to take away regulations on everything. Having gotten away with the trying to do away with the inspectors general, and I mentioned about state capture. That's what happened in South Africa, where you do away with the overseers so that the mice can play.
Mhm.
And whereas the European Union and sort of other countries, they're still saying, the whole idea has become so much more libertarian within the American government, whereas most of Europe tends towards social democrat. So it's a different mindset.
Yeah, maybe.
Which,
Um, and concerning this evolution of regulation, I mean, Ray, you put this on one slide where you said that the so to say the moment of birth for this model risk was the financial crisis. I mean, there had been discussions on model risk before that. I have a few books dealing with model risk, but maybe this is more for the pricing model area. Dealing with this before 2008, but you're right. The starting point for our modern model risk management frameworks was maybe the financial crisis. Um, do you see a similar event that may be the point where a global agreement on what needs to be done within AI regulation would be born? Does there have to be some sort of negative event that impacts a lot of countries in order to find some convergence instead of divergence on AI regulation? And how could
Sorry,
that look like? I mean, we are.
I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately.
Um,
I'd find it very difficult. It would have to be sort of something that's kind of quite extreme out of a science, maybe black swan event out of a science fiction, or Terminator style. I'm making light of the whole thing.
mhm,
But I don't think it's going to be that. I do think it's going to be more of a slow convergence.
mhm,
The manner in which it is going to be managed is going to depend upon the political priorities of the country in question at that point in time.
mhm. So when you stick with the, let's say, classical risk models, this is more or less my home turf. Then the defining moment of model risk management was, I think, the publication of SI 11.7.
Yeah,
And okay, that is with hindsight, of course, but nevertheless, if you have a document, a few pages with very clear structure and very clear uh, uh, topics and principles, that would help a lot. But do we see something like this? And this goes to the audience overall, of course. Do we have something like this, a clear-cut 10-page document on the risks of AI or the model risk management? I mean, Joe mentioned this, and a colleague of mine here, DZ Bank, John, mentioned this that the game changer in this whole model risk discussion is the emergence of generative AI. So maybe
yeah.
if you want to exclude generative AI for the moment, to see if there could be a 10-page document trying to lay down the principles how to control AI or ML risk. I mean, not the Gen AI, maybe the old AI, non-Gen AI.
You're probably going to have to come up with a 10-page document for each type and so. I don't think you're going to listen. It's possible. But sort of who is going to do it? Which anybody that sort of comes up with that is going to be trying to create a God in his own image. It's going to sort of the framework where it stems from is probably going to represent the political views of one country as perhaps the area best suited, best situated to do it would be the European Union, because it seems to be it's becoming more mature in
Mhm,
its approach to the problem. Um, Everyone else seems to be quite singular in how they're approaching it.
mhm. And maybe the audience could try to use their preferred LLM in order to come up with a 10-page document doing exactly what I wanted it to do. The self-regulation of or how Gen AI regulates non-Gen AI, maybe. Um, maybe this is not the, I don't want to make fun of this. Maybe there would be some interesting thoughts in such kinds of documents.
Well, listen.
Um,
So this is a plug for the our model risk management. Sorry, the principles MRM principles document
mhm,
that we came up with, where a lot of what you are describing is in that document, but it's not 10 pages. It kind of goes a lot further than that.
Mhm.
And I
And
think it is available
one final,
so carry on. Yes, Peter.
Mhm. And maybe one final thought. I mean, a lot of people also in the auditorium are from the financial services.
Yeah.
But maybe there are discussions in other areas which may also bring us forward to, I mean, the use of AI within in medicine or in hospital or in the justice system or so. I don't know if the banking sector is in the forefront.
Sorry, the other areas, pharmaceuticals.
Yes, yes.
And pharmaceuticals is, I think, after finance is perhaps the largest risk area. And I think medicines, I think, is up there as well. But they are all are also at risk.